The massive crystalline dome stretched high above the assembled delegates, its transparent walls catching the light from 3 different suns. Inside the Galactic Council chambers, tension filled the air like a thick fog. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their specially designed seats, each one built to accommodate their unique physical forms. Ambassador Vextar of the Altarian Collective stood at the center of the chamber. His blue-scaled skin gleamed under the artificial lights as his 4 arms moved in sharp, angry gestures. The holographic displays floating around him showed images of human ships and settlements scattered across the galaxy. "The humans have crossed every line we have drawn," Vextar said, his natural clicks and whistles immediately converted to standard galactic language by the universal translator. "They act as if our laws mean nothing to them." The first image showed a bustling human settlement on a rocky planet. Captain Kim Miho and his crew built this entire colony on Kepler 442b without asking for permission. They landed their ships, unloaded their equipment, and started building homes as if they owned the place. Angry murmurs rippled through the chamber. The tall, thin ethereal representatives swayed like reeds in a wind, their glowing eyes flickering with disapproval. The massive stone beings shifted in their seats, causing small tremors in the floor. "But that is not all," Vextar continued, switching to another holographic display. This one showed sleek human warships moving through space. "Commander Park Jisoo led an entire fleet directly through our quarantine zone around the Vega system. Our warning beacons meant nothing to them. Our patrol ships were ignored completely." The insectoid hive queen, a creature the size of a small building, clicked her mandibles together in a sound that everyone recognized as extreme annoyance. Her compound eyes reflected the holographic lights like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Next to her, the gaseous beings of the Nebula Collective shifted their cloudy forms, creating swirling patterns that their species used to show distress. "And perhaps worst of all," Vextar said, his voice rising with each word, "Lieutenant Lee Haeun and her traders have been conducting business across the galaxy without following any of our economic rules. They trade with whoever they want, whenever they want, completely ignoring our carefully balanced system." The chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had never agreed on anything before found themselves united in their frustration with humanity. The snake-like Serpentine Council hissed in unison. The crystal-bodied Mineral Federation created a sound like breaking glass. Even the peaceful water dwellers made bubbling noises that indicated serious concern. Supreme Arbiter Kolmesh, a being made entirely of living rock, raised one massive stone hand. His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder, immediately silencing the crowd. "Honored delegates," he began, each word slow and deliberate like stones falling into deep water. "We have tolerated these human violations for too long. They arrived in our galaxy only 50 Earth years ago, yet they behave as if they have always belonged here." The Supreme Arbiter gestured to the displays still floating around Vextar. "They ignore our borders. They disregard our warnings. They treat our ancient laws as if they were mere suggestions." A delegate from the Feathered Alliance stood up, her colorful plumage ruffling with agitation. "Supreme Arbiter, my people have tried to communicate with the humans about proper protocols. They listen politely, nod their heads, and then do exactly what they plan to do anyway." "The same experience here," added a representative from the Deep Space Nomads, his metallic body clanking as he moved. "We explained our trading regulations to them in great detail. They thanked us, took notes, and then established trade routes that completely bypassed our system." Vextar nodded vigorously with all 4 arms. "This is exactly what we mean. The humans act like children who have never learned proper behavior. But children can be taught. These humans seem to believe they already know everything they need to know." The Supreme Arbiter's rocky features seemed to grow even more serious. "The question before us today is simple. Do we continue to allow this disruption of our carefully maintained galactic order, or do we take action?" "What kind of action?" asked a small, furry delegate from the Forest Worlds. "Complete isolation," Kolmesh replied without hesitation. "We cut off all trade with human worlds. We deny them access to our space stations and refueling depots. We treat them as if they do not exist." The chamber fell silent as the weight of this suggestion sank in. Complete isolation was the harshest punishment the Galactic Council could impose. It had only been used 3 times in the past 1,000 years, and each time it had forced the isolated species to completely change their behavior. "But first," the Supreme Arbiter continued, "we will give them one final chance to explain themselves. 30 standard cycles from today, human representatives must appear before this council. They must answer for their actions and agree to follow our laws, or face the consequences." Ambassador Vextar stepped forward again. I call for a vote. All in favor of this ultimatum? One by one, each of the 47 species raised their hands, claws, tentacles, or other appendages to indicate agreement. The vote was unanimous, something that had not happened in the Galactic Council for over 3 centuries. The message will be sent immediately, declared the Supreme Arbiter. The humans have 30 cycles to save themselves from isolation. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, many of them whispered among themselves about what the humans might say in their defense. None of them could imagine any explanation that would excuse such blatant disregard for galactic law. The crystalline dome slowly dimmed as the session ended, but the consequences of this day would echo across the galaxy for years to come. Captain Choi Mina was drinking her morning coffee when the message arrived. The exploration vessel New Sol was floating quietly in space near a beautiful blue nebula, its crew conducting routine research on cosmic radiation patterns. The ship's computer made a soft chiming sound to announce an incoming transmission. Priority message from the Galactic Council, the AI assistant announced in its calm, mechanical voice. Mina set down her coffee cup and walked to the main console. She had been expecting routine communications about trade agreements or maybe an invitation to some diplomatic ceremony. What appeared on her screen was completely different. The message was formal and stern, written in the official language that all galactic governments used. As Mina read through it, her eyebrows rose higher and higher. The Council was accusing humanity of breaking laws she had never heard of. They were angry about missions she considered some of humanity's proudest achievements. This is strange, she said to herself, reading the ultimatum again. Instead of panic or fear, she felt genuinely confused. During her 5 years as a starship captain, Mina had always assumed that galactic regulations were more like suggestions than actual laws. When humans first made contact with alien civilizations 50 years ago, everything had been so chaotic and exciting that nobody had bothered to explain the rules properly. She pressed the communication button on her desk. Computer, please ask Dr. Yoon Dae-ho, Major Young Saman, and Cultural Analyst Kang Ji-hun to come to my ready room immediately. Message sent, Captain, the AI replied. Within an hour, 3 of her most trusted officers stood in the small meeting room adjacent to the ship's bridge. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho was a tall, thin man who specialized in studying alien life forms. His lab coat was covered with colorful stains from his latest experiments. Major Young Saman wore her military uniform perfectly pressed, her short hair neat and professional. Kang Ji-hun carried a tablet computer filled with information about different alien cultures and their customs. We have a problem, Mina began, displaying the Council's message on the wall screen. Or maybe they have a problem with us. I'm not sure which. The 3 officers read through the accusations in silence. Dr. Yoon was the first to speak. They're upset about the Epsilon Eridani colony? He asked, his voice filled with disbelief. We saved 12 million people from a plague that would have killed them all. According to this, Mina replied, pointing to a specific section of the message, that was unauthorized intervention in a quarantine system. Major Young laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Unauthorized intervention? We answered a distress call. When someone is drowning, you don't ask for permission before throwing them a life preserver. Kang Ji-hun was scrolling through his tablet, looking up information about galactic law. This is fascinating, he said, though his tone suggested he found it more disturbing than fascinating. According to their legal system, we were supposed to file a formal request for intervention, wait for approval from 3 different committees, and then conduct the rescue operation under official council supervision. How long would that have taken? Mina asked. Based on their bureaucratic procedures, approximately 6 months, Kang replied. Dr. Yoon shook his head. Those people would have been dead in 6 weeks without treatment. We had the medicine they needed right in our cargo hold. Mina looked at the charges again. They're also angry about our medical research station on Kepler 442. They call it a territorial violation. We discovered crystalline formations there that revolutionized treatment for bone decay disease, Dr. Yoon said. That research has helped millions of people across dozens of different species. Did we ask permission to land there? Major Young asked. Kang checked his records. The planet was listed as restricted for scientific study pending council evaluation. The evaluation had been pending for 47 years. 47 years? Mina repeated. What were they waiting for? Apparently they were still forming a committee to decide which committee should evaluate the planet, Kang said, his voice flat with disbelief. Major Young stood up and began pacing around the small room. Let me understand this correctly. We're in trouble for saving lives, conducting medical research, and trading with people who needed our help. That seems to be the situation, Mina confirmed. Are we supposed to let people die while bureaucrats have meetings about having meetings? Jung asked, her voice rising with anger. Mina looked at her three officers, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. They were all good people who had joined the space service to explore the galaxy and help others. The idea that helping others was somehow wrong seemed completely backwards to them. Computer, Mina said, addressing the ship's AI system. Set course for Nexus Prime, maximum safe speed. Course plotted and laid in, Captain. Estimated travel time, 12 days. Dr. Yoon looked surprised. We're actually going to answer their summons? Oh yes, Mina replied with a smile that would have worried anyone who knew her well. We're going to answer their questions. But not the way they expect. She turned to Kang Ji-hoon. I want you to prepare a complete record of every humanitarian mission humanity has conducted in the past 5 years. Every life saved, every medicine shared, every technology freely distributed. What are you planning, Captain? Major Young asked. Mina's smile grew wider. They want to put humanity on trial for caring too much about other people. I think it's time someone put their system on trial instead. The new soul turned toward Nexus Prime, its crew preparing not an apology, but a revolution in thinking that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep, resonating hum. Captain Choi Mina walked through first, her dark blue uniform crisp and clean. Behind her followed Dr. Yoon Dae-ho carrying a case full of medical equipment, Major Young Saman with her military bearing straight and proud, and cultural analyst Kang Ji-hoon holding a portable holographic projector. The chamber was even more impressive than the humans had imagined. 47 different species sat in their specialized seats, arranged in a perfect circle around the center floor. Some delegates were tall and thin like walking trees. Others were small and round like living boulders. A few seemed to be made of pure energy, flickering and glowing in their containment fields. All of them stared at the human delegation with expressions that clearly said they expected to see fear, shame, and begging for forgiveness. What they saw instead was calm confidence and quiet determination. Ambassador Vextar stood up from his seat, his 4 blue arms crossed in what humans had learned was a gesture of disapproval among his people. Humans, he said, his translator making his voice sound cold and formal. You stand accused of 43 separate violations of galactic law. How do you answer these charges? Captain Mina walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at all the assembled delegates. She did not lower her eyes or bow her head. Instead, she activated Kang Ji-hoon's holographic projector. We answer by showing you the truth, she said simply. The first hologram appeared above their heads, showing a beautiful blue planet covered in cities and farmland. Then the image changed, showing the same planet covered in dark spots like a disease. This is Epsilon Eridani 7, Mina began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Home to 12 million people from the Cetacean Alliance. 3 months ago, a plague began spreading through their population. The hologram showed hospitals overflowing with sick people. Medical workers in protective suits moved desperately from patient to patient. Children cried as their parents became sicker and sicker. They sent out distress calls to everyone in the galaxy, Mina continued, including the Galactic Council. Ambassador Vextar's skin began to turn a darker shade of blue, which the humans had learned meant anger or embarrassment. The contamination protocols clearly state that quarantine systems cannot be. 12 million people dying, Mina interrupted, her voice becoming louder. Your protocols classified them as acceptable losses. Your exact words found in your own records. The hologram changed to show human medical ships arriving at the planet. The vessels were small compared to the massive council ships, but they moved with purpose and speed. Our medical teams arrived within 18 hours of receiving the distress call. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho stepped forward to explain. We identified the plague organism, developed a treatment, and began distributing medicine immediately. The contamination risk, Vextar tried to speak again, was contained within 6 hours, Dr. Yoon interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. We used quarantine techniques that we immediately shared with 7 other species who requested them. 0 additional infections occurred outside the original planet. The hologram showed healthy people walking out of hospitals, children playing in parks again, and cities returning to normal life. But that's not the end of the story, Dr. Yoon continued. We didn't just cure the plague. We taught the local medical teams how to produce the medicine themselves. We left behind equipment and knowledge so they could handle similar emergencies in the future. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The tall, tree-like ethereal representatives began glowing slightly brighter, which their species did when they felt strong emotions. Cultural analyst Kang Jihun stepped forward and changed the hologram to show a rocky desert planet with strange crystal formations jutting out of the ground. Kepler 442b, he announced. Your records show this planet as a restricted zone pending evaluation. The evaluation had been pending for 47 years. A few delegates made sounds that the universal translators rendered as embarrassed coughs. We landed there to study these crystal formations, Kang continued. The hologram zoomed in to show the beautiful rainbow-colored crystals. What we discovered revolutionized medicine for 43 different species. The image changed to show microscopic views of bone cells, before and after treatment with medicine made from the crystals. Bone decay disease affects millions of people across the galaxy, Kang explained. Before our discovery, it was considered incurable. Now treatment is simple and effective. Did you profit from this discovery? Asked a small, furry delegate from somewhere in the back of the chamber. Profit? Kang seemed genuinely confused by the question. We immediately shared all research data with every medical facility that requested it. No patents were filed. No payment was required. The knowledge belongs to everyone. The chamber grew very quiet. Even the gaseous nebula collective stopped their constant shifting and swirling. Captain Mina stepped forward again. Your third accusation involves unauthorized trading operations. The hologram changed to show human ships landing on various planets, their cargo holds full of farming equipment and seeds. These operations involved teaching agricultural techniques to struggling colonies, she said. Colonies that your own regulations prevented you from helping. Major Young Saman activated her own data pad. In the past 5 years, human agricultural advisors have helped establish food security on 137 worlds. We've shared crop rotation techniques, soil improvement methods, and drought-resistant plant varieties. All free of charge, Captain Mina added. Because hungry people shouldn't have to wait for committees to decide if they deserve to eat. Supreme Arbiter Kolmesh, the massive rock being who led the council, had remained silent throughout the presentation. His craggy face showed no expression, but his silence was becoming more meaningful with each passing minute. The chamber was no longer filled with the confident anger that had started the session. Instead, an uncomfortable tension settled over the delegates as they began to realize that humanity's crimes were actually acts of compassion and generosity that their own system had failed to provide. The silence in the chamber stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Ambassador Vextar's blue skin had turned a deep purple color, and his forearms trembled with barely controlled anger. He stood up so quickly that his chair made a scraping sound against the floor. Arrogance, he shouted, his voice so loud that the universal translator crackled and popped. Pure human arrogance. You think you know better than civilizations that have existed for thousands and thousands of years. His words echoed through the crystalline dome, bouncing off the walls and creating a harsh, ringing sound. Several delegates nodded their heads in agreement. The insectoid hive queen clicked her mandibles together in what sounded like applause. Captain Choi Mina did not raise her voice. She did not get angry or defensive. Instead, she looked directly at Ambassador Vextar with calm, steady eyes. We don't know better, she said quietly, but her words carried clearly through the chamber. We just couldn't watch people die while committees debated whether to form other committees. The simple honesty of her statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates who had been nodding in agreement suddenly stopped. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Major Yong Saman walked to the central control panel and placed her hand on the activation scanner. The chamber's main display system came to life, filling the air above them with a massive holographic screen. These are distress signals that the Galactic Council received over the past 10 years, she announced. The hologram filled with hundreds of desperate messages. A mining colony begging for medical supplies after a cave collapse. A farming world asking for help as their crops failed and their people starved. A research station sending urgent calls for rescue as their life support systems failed. Each message was time-stamped, showing exactly when it was received by the Council. Some were months old. Some were years old. A few were more than 5 years old. Response time to these emergencies, Major Young said, her voice growing colder with each word, never. The word, never, appeared in large, glowing letters above each distress call. The effect was devastating. Hundreds of desperate pleas for help, all marked with the same terrible word. Now here are the same types of signals reaching human vessels, Major Young continued. the display changed completely. Instead of unanswered calls, it showed human ships responding to emergencies across the galaxy. Medical vessels racing to plague-stricken worlds. Cargo ships delivering food to starving colonies. Rescue ships pulling survivors from failing space stations. Average human response time to emergency calls, she announced, 14 hours. The number 14 hours glowed above each rescue mission. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Where the Council had responded never, humans had responded in less than a day. A low murmur began to spread through the chamber. The gaseous nebula collective, which had been swirling in steady, confident patterns, suddenly began flickering and changing colors rapidly. In their species, this was how they showed deep shame and regret. Several of the smaller species representatives began standing up and walking toward the exits. They could not bear to sit and listen to more evidence of their collective failure to help others. The delegate from the forest worlds, a small creature covered in soft brown fur, stopped at the door and turned back toward the human delegation. "We received 17 distress calls from colony worlds in our own system," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We never answered any of them because they didn't follow proper request procedures." Dr. Yoon Daeho stepped forward and activated his own data display. Charts and graphs filled the air around him, showing medical breakthroughs and technological advances. "The vegan plague cure," he began, pointing to a complex molecular diagram. "After we developed it, we shared the formula freely with 87 different worlds. No patents were filed. No licensing fees were charged. Anyone who needed it could make it." The diagram showed the medicine's molecular structure in beautiful, rotating 3D detail. Below it, a list scrolled past showing all the worlds that had received the information. "The agricultural revolution on Tau Ceti," Dr. Yoon continued. "New farming techniques that increased crop yields by 300%. We published detailed instruction manuals in 43 different languages and sent agricultural advisors to any world that requested help." More diagrams appeared, showing before and after pictures of farmlands. Barren, dusty fields transformed into lush, green croplands full of healthy plants. "Gravitational shielding technology," he concluded. "Developed to protect space stations from asteroid impacts." The complete technical specifications were made open source and available to all galactic civilizations at no cost. The technical drawings for the gravitational shields were incredibly complex, but Dr. Yoon had made them freely available to everyone. At the bottom of each diagram were the words "free to all" in dozens of different languages. Cultural analyst Kang Ji-hoon stepped into the center of the chamber. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the dome. "We are not conquerors," he said simply. "We are not trying to build an empire or take control of the galaxy. We are neighbors who cannot sleep at night when we know that others are suffering and we have the power to help them." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates who had been sitting quietly suddenly began talking all at once. Some were arguing with each other. Others were demanding to know why their own governments had not responded to emergency calls. A few were openly weeping as they realized how many lives could have been saved if they had acted instead of following procedures. The Supreme Arbiter Kolmesh raised his massive stone hand, but for the first time in anyone's memory, the gesture did not bring immediate silence. The delegates were too upset, too ashamed, and too angry with themselves to stop talking. The trial had become something none of them had expected. Instead of judging humanity for breaking the rules, they were being forced to judge themselves for following rules that let people die unnecessarily. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen anything like the 3 days that followed humanity's presentation. What had started as a formal trial had turned into the biggest crisis in galactic government history. Delegates shouted at each other across the chamber. Ancient alliances crumbled in hours. Species that had worked together for centuries suddenly found themselves on opposite sides of fundamental questions about right and wrong. On the first day after the humans spoke, the Aquatic Cetacean Alliance made a shocking announcement. Their representative, a graceful being who communicated through beautiful singing sounds, stood up in the middle of a heated argument about emergency response protocols. "We withdraw from this council immediately," she sang, her voice creating haunting melodies that the translators rendered into words. "We formally request alliance with humanity. If caring about others is a crime here, then we choose to be criminals." The chamber fell silent as the cetacean delegate gathered her things and walked toward the exit. Before leaving, she turned back to address the humans directly. "Captain Mina, Dr. Yoon, you saved our colony on Epsilon Eridani. We will never forget that. Our ships are at your service." The Crystalline Consortium, beings made of living mineral formations, began vibrating at frequencies that created musical tones throughout the chamber. Their leader, a creature that looked like a walking diamond sculpture, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "Complete restructuring of galactic law is required," they announced. "The current system has failed. We demand emergency elections for all council positions." By the second day, smaller species had begun declaring independence from council authority entirely. The forest worlds announced they were leaving to form their own mutual aid society. The deep space nomads said they would no longer recognize council jurisdiction over their trading routes. Even some individual colonies from larger species began sending messages declaring themselves independent. Supreme Arbiter Kolmesh tried to maintain order, but his massive stone form seemed somehow smaller as he watched his government falling apart around him. On the morning of the third day, he called for a private meeting with the human delegation. "This has gone too far," he rumbled, his rocky voice sounding tired and old. "We offer you a position as council arbiters. You would become the galaxy's official humanitarian enforcers. Whatever powers you need to save lives, you would have them." The offer was enormous. Council arbiters had authority to override any government decision, to command any military force, to redistribute resources as they saw fit. It was more power than any species had ever been given in galactic history. Captain Choimina looked at her three companions, then back at the Supreme Arbiter. "Thank you for the offer," she said politely, "but we decline." Kolmesh's rocky features showed genuine surprise. "You decline? This is everything you could want. The power to help anyone anywhere without interference." "That's exactly the problem," Mina replied. "We don't want power over others. We want to work with others." She stood up and addressed not just the Supreme Arbiter, but the entire chamber through the communication system. "We propose something completely different," her voice carried to every delegate. "Dissolve this council entirely. Replace it with a voluntary confederation where species contribute according to their abilities and their conscience, not because rigid protocols force them to." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the chamber erupted in cheers and applause. The other half began shouting in anger and disbelief. The debate that followed lasted 14 hours without a break. Some delegates argued that the council had maintained peace for over 1,000 years. Others pointed out that it had also maintained systematic neglect of those who needed help most. Some warned that dissolving the government would lead to chaos and war. Others argued that the current system was already chaotic for anyone trying to get emergency aid. When the final vote was called, the chamber was packed with delegates who had not left their seats in hours. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves voting together. Others that had been allies for centuries found themselves on opposite sides. The vote was so close that it had to be counted 3 times to make sure it was correct. 24 species voted to dissolve the council and create a new voluntary confederation. 23 species voted to keep the old system. Supreme Arbiter Kolmesh stared at the final count for a long time before speaking. "By the margin of 1 vote, the Galactic Council is hereby dissolved." But even before the official announcement was made, the revolution had already spread across the galaxy. Colony after colony sent messages declaring independence from the old system and requesting to join humanity's new approach to galactic cooperation. The humans had never planned to create an alliance, but within weeks over 200 worlds had requested admission to what news services were calling the Coalition of Conscience. Unlike the old council, membership was completely voluntary. Unlike the old system, there were no lengthy procedures for providing humanitarian aid. Major Young Saman stood on the observation deck of the New Sol, watching through the large windows as former council worlds celebrated with fireworks displays and light shows visible from space. "Do you think it will actually work?" she asked Dr. Yoon Daeho, who was standing beside her with a cup of coffee. Dr. Yoon smiled and took a sip of his coffee before answering. "We just turned a galaxy-spanning bureaucracy into a neighborhood watch program. If that isn't the most human thing possible, I don't know what is." Captain Mina joined them at the window, watching the celebration displays light up the darkness of space. The age of human influence in the galaxy had begun, but not through conquest or control. Instead, it had started with the simple revolutionary idea that every life mattered more than every rule, and that helping others was more important than following procedures. Across the galaxy, distress calls that would have gone unanswered for months under the old system were now being responded to within hours. The Coalition of Conscience was proving that sometimes the best government was the one that got out of the way and let people help each other.